right now. So SDGs in higher education, and we have a little bit of everything. It's my pleasure to give the word to Professor Willy Legrand, who is going to be also chairing the session. So good morning.
Yes, good morning. Hi, how are you?
Perfect. Good. We can hear you. We can see you. Everything is great. So general rules, more or less 20 minutes per participant, right? You can allow the audience to ask questions right after the presentation, or you can wait until the end, okay? And with great pleasure, the floor is all yours.
All right. Okay. So thank you very much for this, and thank you to my predecessor for a very interesting presentation, which I'd like to come back to. So my name is Professor Willy Legrand. Thank you very much, Leila, for the invitation. I teach here in Germany. I'm located in Germany, but I've been teaching, or I still do, in France and in the US and in Singapore, etc. And my field of specialization is sustainability in the hospitality industry. I'm a lead author of a textbook that's in its fourth edition in that field, and I moderate a panel online with 90 experts, tourism and hospitality experts. And so, good morning to everyone. Again, thanks for the to the organizers of the Incorporate Sustainability Conference. It's obviously my pleasure here to be here and to provide my thoughts, really, an analysis of what I call here on the title, the winding road of embedding sustainability into business degrees. And I'll look a little bit more into the case of hospitality management, and that'll take about 20 minutes or so. Okay, so just to get us started, and if we take a quick look at business education, we can say that there's a certain success story here, and I don't really mean a success story in terms of that business education has done its job in regards to preparing business graduates with the challenges we face now. That's not really what I'm saying, but the growth of the global economy over the past decades, when you look at it, has sparked quite a bit of a demand for business education, which has surged worldwide from the mid-90s onwards, and of course to the obvious benefits of business program and business school. Now, we can also add the fact that the barriers of entries for business programs are notoriously lower compared to if you'd established a medical school or a chemistry lab, for example, particularly on the cost side of the equation. Now, whether this growth will continue, slow down, or even reverse in the future is really a question worth asking, and surely business school administrators are considering the various scenarios. And the scenario of buildings cannot ignore some of the challenges, and that, I guess, that can be best described in the words of Johan Rockström, from the Potsdam Institute of Climate Impact Research, and I quote, that's a quote from him, from Johan: COVID-19 evolved into a pandemic due to the now well-known risk cocktail of the 21st century: ecosystem destruction, species loss, global warming colliding with risky human behavior like illegal wildlife trade. All of this is played out in a globalized network of trade and travel. So, assuming that the world economy continues to expand, where business innovations drive that growth, and particularly, in dealing with some of the greater challenges, such as, harnessing clean energy, producing clean technologies, finding solutions to, the world agricultural challenges, and so on, and that business school respond and really transform themselves from the current traditional curriculum towards sort of a more multidisciplinary programs, then the demand for business education may continue to grow. But should the economy continues to shrink, and business management is conducted until now, is perceived as core to many of the climate and biodiversity challenges, and with business education having failed to prepare graduates on how to cope and really deal with those challenges, then the demand for business education may drop, as perhaps a younger generation turns towards other fields of study, such as natural sciences, for example. And of course, the third scenario could be that economy stabilizes, business school adapts, and recognize that both traditional business education has failed to recognize the importance to deal with societal and environmental issues, but also proposes solutions with innovative curriculum. So really, the question, I guess, that's perhaps more interesting here is not so much about the various scenarios I've presented on the demand of business education, but whether the business schools and the business programs are actually producing the right graduates. And if we consider the scope of business education and business management in particular, you look at basically the study of the ways in which business organization can be managed effectively and efficiently. And what we mean by this is effectively is basically doing the right tasks, and efficiently doing those tasks correctly at the least possible cost and the minimum wastage of resources. Now, if we, and this is key to the component of business management. It's about examining, how those limited resources, whether it's raw material, capital, people, etc., you can use those to create, the maximum amount of output in terms of product and services that you put it through the marketplace. So really, business management is concerned with the study of those processes and the institutions in that economic system. So the task of business management is really to determine, how can we achieve the highest possible output with the least possible to maximize profit to the owners and shareholders. And, the purpose of business management curriculum is often conceived in terms of providing students with the skills and knowledge required to participate in that business activity. So, these business activities, I've listed them here, under the heading business structure. You've got everything from employees to finance and sales and processes. Now, each of those activities fall under specific courses or modules delivered in business schools. For example, we take employees and business organization. That falls under organizational behavior or human resources management. If you take processes, that falls under operations management, and so on. So from this perspective, really, business and management education is the study for business, with the essential purpose of equipping learners for the needs of commerce and industry. And this is really a fairly narrow view used by so many business schools. If we consider that business education includes both applied knowledge and skills and a critical evaluation of business as a social activity, we can then broaden that scope. For example, the stakeholders theory suggests that the purpose of business is to create as much value as possible for all stakeholders rather than the owners and the shareholders. So in order to succeed and be sustainable over time, meaning in terms of financially sustainable over time, the executive must keep the interest of customers, suppliers, employees, communities, etc., all aligned and going in the same direction. In this case, business management studies is more about deploying sociological, economic, philosophical, and other perspective, really, which enables learners to develop a critical understanding of business as a social phenomenon. So if we, the question remains, is business education equipped to deal with the crises of the Earth system? This is really an unprecedented situation that the industry is facing. We have a twofold blow, really. We have the imperative to deal with the climate emergency, the biodiversity collapse, amidst a humanitarian crisis, all the while, and that's really the second blow, ensuring some kind of economic recovery. So as the topic of sustainability has risen to the forefront of global politics agenda with the Agenda 2030 or the Paris Agreement as an example, it's also sort of trickled down to businesses, at least to some of them, which may have implemented sustainability throughout all functions, perhaps in the addition of a sustainability department. So there is sort of an increased recognition that in order for businesses to be competitive and really for students to be prepared to tackle the challenges of the 21st century, those principles of sustainability need to be taught within business schools and programs as well. But interestingly, and perhaps despite the United Nations Decade for Education for Sustainable Development, which ended in 2014, we still have actually a long ways to go. In fact, one would think that the most sensible approach would be to integrate sustainability thinking within the entire curriculum. So, for example, in financial management, where perhaps the impact of climate change on financial markets are explored, or in accounting, where the methods for calculating the internalization of environmental externalities are discussed, or a class reflecting on the ethics of marketing and economics and so on. So this idea of embedding sustainability in such manner, that's really known as mainstreaming. And that comes from the work of Kati Rosinko on an article that was published, it's already 10 years ago, in the Academy of Management, Learning and Education. But in fact, the reality is quite different. I mean, academic freedom being paramount, a professor may decide or not to include a session where leading business people in the community maybe present their activities on corporate social responsibility, or perhaps they add an extra case study that's being discussed in class. This is perhaps an easy method to reach many students at once, it's often just a supplementary method, and thus it's left to the end of a term or the end of a lecture if times permit, and when other core material has been covered. And so this technique of just adding topic to a class is known as piggybacking. There is a third method out there, which is really to insert specific optional course or electives or module within a curriculum, such as a core that's completely dedicated to corporate social responsibility. That's known as digging deep. So that's similar to piggybacking. It's also a very uncomplicated technique for implementing sustainability because you're just not making any changes in the existing curriculum or existing structure. However, it's often perceived as an add-on and similar to adding an extra lecture, especially if it's offered as an elective. So students may therefore gain the impression that sustainability really can be conducted by specialists, but it's really nothing for general manager. It's really nothing for mainstream employees to be concerned about. And that's really one of the challenges that we're having in business education. So, this is what you're going to be seeing in a minute here. This is a Rusinko matrix, and probably many of you know it already, but it looks slightly in more detail. So we've already discussed piggybacking and mainstreaming, which is a strategy to integrate sustainability within an existing program structure, as well as digging deep when you establish new structures, such as creating elective, for example. Now there is a fourth option, and it's called focusing. So it's similar to mainstreaming in that it looks at embedding sustainability in a broad curriculum rather than add-on courses, but it is a new structure that will be creating an entire new program. And so I think our speaker, Juan, just before was mentioning about the program that is being accredited right now. Another example would be we have here in Germany a university called Leuphana University in Lüneburg, and they're just starting this fall a master's in management and sustainable accounting and finance. And so that will be the creation, that's a focusing approach. It could also be about the development of an interdisciplinary sustainability program that included other disciplines than just management. Now, in an article that was published in a journal of business ethics, the authors argued that the various quadrants that you see here, they're helpful, of course, to understand how sustainability can be integrated in business curriculum, but arguably less helpful in understanding why there remain so many hindrances, so many barriers, so many blockages that really prevents successful institutional integration. And so many researchers have argued that all right, I'm not too sure what happened. Somehow everything stopped, and I'm not too sure where it stopped at some point. Maybe somebody can help me here. My screen, I don't know if it was for everyone, my screen just shut down. Leila, are you here?
Yeah, I'm just commenting in the chat that it's blocked for everyone. So we were left, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, perfect. We were left at the part when you say that it's not enough to just add on programs, but that we need to kind of a overall revision of what is being taught as the main course, and then everything went black. So now we should be better.
We should be better. So I'm just going to share my screen here.
Please do. Thank you very much.
All right. Okay. So for everyone, I'm not sure what happened, but somehow you were all gone, and so was I. And so I don't know if you've seen this here. I'm just going to keep on going from where I was. And so these were the quadrants that I was just talking about, and hopefully you've seen this. I'm not too sure. And those, as I said, this matrix is very helpful to understand how sustainability can be implemented, but it's not so useful into explaining why there are so many barriers still in actually implementing sustainability throughout an institution. And so with this in mind, when one looks beyond the curricula sustainability integration, it's about really a systematic or systemic institutional integration, where you need to foster changes in the students, in the faculty, in the administrator, in the institution as a whole, as well as potentially the organization that hired the alumni. And this may be the area which is of particular interest, in fact, this area of focusing as well as looking beyond the curricula. Okay, so I hope I'm catching up a little bit here. So I'll just do a quick look here on sustainability. So the case of sustainability and hospitality management, in fact. So hospitality management is a sector that's really currently suffering heavily from the pandemic, from the lockdown, from the decrease in travel, of course. And at the same time, many of the hotels are operating in regions that are affected firsthand by the climate emergency, such as low-lying islands or mountainous regions. But parallel to this, the travel sector is a considerable culprit when it comes to global emissions, to waste creation, etc. So, and with all this in mind, and in the words of the UN Secretary General, Mr. Guterres, who said recently, it is imperative that we rebuild the tourism sector in a safe, equitable, and climate-friendly manner. So there is a little bit of an above and below the water surface situation in tourism. In fact, some destinations have seen tourists coming back, mostly local and regional tourism. Some of the destinations that were deeply frustrated with the impact of over-tourism are now desperate to see tourists back. And so in a way, over-tourism and under-tourism are both causes of a destruction of destinations. But, you know, as some destinations are slowly bouncing back to the normal, there is some optimism out there. However, there is massive amount of turmoil below the water with all the issues that were mentioned by my previous speakers. And we talk about climate emergency and biodiversity collapse particularly. So now more than ever, it's the right time to define growth and prosperity, but not again solely in terms of rising income and GDP, which is what so many business schools do, but put forward you know, the rising in ecological well-being, or perhaps, as the previous speakers, we're talking about planetary well-being. And so now more than ever, there seems to be a bit of a consensus in this hospitality management business studies that teaching sustainability is important for the next generation, often this next generation, which is more in touch with those global issues than their older peers. And so, however, in practice, what does it look like? So I've been doing this sustainability lecturing and writing for over 15 years in pretty much all continents now, trying to implement sustainability into programs, business program. But, you know, similar to many other fields of business studies, there are various gaps out there. For example, there's a massive gap that exists between educators' attitudes in favor of sustainability and school actually teaching it. There's an older study, but I like to quote it, an older study conducted by Deal that gives some interesting insights, in fact, of how much has changed or not since then. In her study, almost 3/4 of hospitality business educators sampled felt it was important for students to be taught about sustainable issues, but only roughly 1/10 of them actually ended up teaching sustainability in a classroom. And this was partially due to the lack of support from the institutions in tackling sustainability within the curriculum or within the institution. Or many stated that it's just cumbersome to add sustainability to preset lectures. And so there is a disconnect that's really attributed to the lack of coherent approach in incorporating sustainability in undergraduate hospitality and tourism curriculum. And so while this research I show here is a bit dated, this discussion is still going on by the leading hospitality management institutions struggling really to find the right path in integrating sustainability. And this is really not rocket science here. There are several options that exist as we discussed through this presentation, and a full integration is probably the best method for any program to incorporate sustainability into their curricula based, you know, on the benefits that it provides to all stakeholders, and most notably the students and the future leaders. I would also argue that, you know, in the sort of turbo business degree modus which we've set around the planet, that we really need additional specialized courses that should be on offer, a sort of a catalog of courses with more interdisciplinary approach, such I've just listed here, organic agriculture, which would be super important since a constant supply of healthy and fresh food plays such an important role to the hospitality business, for example, of course. And so the argument would be include more natural science in business curriculum and foster partnership, not competition, between institutions, ensuring what works and what doesn't work. I quite like this model here. So there's Fletcher and Dewberry in an older article as well, conceptualize sort of this continuum consisting of two polar opposite views of sustainability, and that could be adapted to hospitality. On the left side of the continuum, which you see here, sustainability is really considered an aspect of hospitality, while on the other end of the continuum, sustainability as the context. And this is fairly important. So if a program views or embraces the view that hospitality is the main context, sustainability will always remain a component that is relegated to specific class module within a class. And I mean, that's the same with all the business program. However, if a program embraces that sustainability is the ultimate context, then integration of anything else or integration of sustainability will occur naturally, because sustainability is really the end goal rather than just the advancement of hospitality. And so finally, that raised, quite a few questions here, and I'm gonna come to an end here with the talk. I apologize again for the break that we've had. Should business education have more natural sciences in their curriculum, considering that business really don't operate in a vacuum? And as far as I'm concerned, a clear understanding of biodiversity impact and carbon footprint and so on is as much an integral part of being a manager today as it is to know about how to conduct cost control. It raises questions on academic freedom versus the requirements to integrate sustainability within a curriculum, as well as the need for cooperation at all levels. Also interdisciplinary business education really needs to reinvent itself if it hopes to survive really and be part of the solution to the greater challenges. And so anyways, that concludes my short talk. I'm at 20 minutes or even with the break, so that went quite well. I want to thank you all for your attention. Of course, we'll welcome any questions if there are. I'm just going to stop sharing my screen right here, and there we go. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Willy. This was excellent. This just raised basically all the points I'm fighting for, but in terms of corporate law. So let's see how lucky we're gonna get with getting our point across. You can open the floor for questions. If there are none, then I'm gonna abuse my position as a moderator and I'm gonna pose one. Okay?
Yeah, you bet. Any questions? Please write them down. I don't know where I can see here the chat, so just write them down in the chat, or Leila, maybe you can let me know.
There are some in the chat. Maybe you can read them out loud, just the main points, and then answer to them because they're already popping up in the chat.
Okay, so I'm just reading here from Rock. Thank you, interesting presentation. I'm just checking here quickly. Okay, so yes. All right, so it's a very long and very useful comment. So there's a question that's come at the end. Thanks very much for that. That said, shouldn't business education pay more attention to peer-reviewed studies in science where the level of analytical and quantitative is rather than, I've just lost it, rather than mere intuition to better implement sustainability in their practice and curricula? I quite agree with this. This was the argument that I was making about having more natural science implemented into business curricula rather than having business as a vacuum. I think that's something that's very important for sure. There is a disconnect, however, in terms of scientific peer-reviewed article and the business world. There's a disconnect between what scientists do and what business people take the time to read. So that's something that could be definitely approach. It might be more helpful for hospitality industry to consider findings from journals like Lancet Science, Nature, instead of Harvard Business Review. Yes, of course. I mean, the question is very good, but there's very little doubt about this. I mean, this is what I've been doing for 15 years, trying to bring this knowledge across to all the business institute I've been working at. But it's not implemented mainstream. So Harvard Business Review is still one of the many journal that would be preferred by many of my colleagues. Having said that, the Harvard Business Review itself has implemented quite a bit of more approaches towards, well, partially corporate social responsibility, but also social entrepreneurship and some direction towards more natural sciences. Harry Kumar Suberi says, how is the expectations from ecotourism business after the pandemic? Yeah, so this is, I mean, this is the subject of multiple webinars. In fact, the funds brought by tourism to further conservation, especially in the global south, has been not an easy way, but it's been a simpler way to raise money to be able to provide conservation effort. And of course, it's crumbled now completely, and it's actually shown how much tourism, while being a very resilient industry, is actually a dangerous leg to stand on by itself if we want to undertake conservation projects. So, I mean, that's a very good question, Harry. Thanks very much for that. But there's much more to it. I'm having a next webinar next week with the Long Run, which is a network of eco-tourist business operators, and we'll be talking about this. But there's a lot more to say about this. I'm just checking here quickly if there was anything. No, these were the main two questions, I think, at this point, Leila. So it's a good comment actually from Rock as well in terms of implementing natural science and other journal articles, peer-reviewed articles that are non-business. And I'm quite a big fan of this, quite a big supporters. So just maybe it's a bit of an anecdotal view here, but this past spring, together with my university here in Germany and another university in the Netherlands, in Maastricht, we've created a 24-hour hackathon on sustainable hospitality and tourism. And part of the readings that were given to the students were from those journals you mentioned, such as The Lancet and Science beforehand. So I think some of us are making an effort, but it is not institutionalized. It remains very much, it's my effort as a professor, and I take the liberty to do this because this is the area that I've specialized on, but it's not throughout a business school, it's not throughout a curriculum, unless the business school is set from scratch in terms of implementing sustainability throughout their programs, which exists. Otherwise, it remains just an add-on or part of the academic freedom of a professor to just say, I'll just add a case study or we'll look at this. For me, that's not enough. I mean, there's no doubt. Business plays so an important role in both the problems and solutions that we need to have more involvement for sure. And that starts, of course, with our students at undergraduates and graduate program. Okay. Okay, so there's another question from Ama here. Can I ask you about your experience on gaining acceptance from your colleagues on mainstreaming sustainability into? Yeah, very good questions. A lot of problems, Ama, with this. It depends on the institutions, but there's a low acceptance unless there is an institutional commitment to say that the SDGs are part of a curriculum or sustainability carries through as a red line throughout the curriculum. For me to go to my colleague and say, listen, you know what, in your finance course, can you do this? Can you talk about, I can do this, but it remains really, really within the classical training of business professors to just say, well, you know, either they don't have the knowledge or they're not interested, or some of them will be open to say, yeah, I can do an extra session talking about this. But, you know, unless there's an institutional commitment, it's not easy, in fact, to move colleagues from different faculties, whether it's marketing, whether it's economics, whether it's finance, whether it's whatever it is, processes, IT, and so on, to necessarily have that without having a commitment from the start in your program. And so mainstreaming sustainability into core courses is a struggle. And you know what? I've had that struggle for 15 years. So, and my university, we have great majors for our students, but we haven't been able to mainstream this. So that tells you a little bit where the challenges are. That brings us to the question of academic freedom under the umbrella of institutional commitment if individual refuse to embed. Yes, exactly. I'm not too sure. I think the panel this afternoon most probably will be talking about this a little bit. Yes, exactly. So I'm seeing a change in some institutions. So our university, Juan was just talking about assessing the carbon footprint of a university. So that's beyond the curriculum. It's really about the institution and their impact. We've done the same now with our university we've assessed the carbon footprint, and we are working towards carbon neutrality. And so we've been assessed by one of the independent third-party auditor here in Germany, and we're looking towards carbon neutrality. So I'm quite interested in this because the commitment of the larger institution towards carbon neutrality sends a message to my colleagues, sends a message to the rest of the community around. So it's not only university, but it's the partners of the universities, it's the businesses we work with, and of course it's my colleague, the administrators, etc. So when there's that commitment up there, it also is important because it sends the proper message. Karina is asking, Leila, you stop me because I don't know when I think the next speaker also will come in. So Karina is asking, what do you think are the biggest obstacles to educators' attitudes in favor of sustainability being translated into action in the classroom? Karina, I think one of the research that I have presented, I just made a quick quote from it, but it's actually a very good research. It's a bit dated, it's 2009, but one of the things that's happening is two things really. It's the traditional training that educators have received themselves, which works as a hindrance. So they, a finance professor has followed a fairly strict curriculum on finance education throughout his or her career, and then when it's time to actually pass it on to the next students, then that is simply being recreated. So whatever has been learned is being passed around without necessarily a cut or a new thinking. And then the other part is it's just many educators, and it sounds a little bit, I mean, I don't like to say it, but it sounds a little bit sort of not so important, but it's just because many educators find it cumbersome to dig deep into sustainability. Some people may say it's too complicated. I'm not too sure how I should implement in a marketing class principles of sustainable marketing or green marketing or anything with SDGs, which is crazy because there's something about product in the SDGs as well. But I think it's just doing the extra effort to try to see how do I change my course on marketing, which I may follow the 4 Ps and the various marketing theories, and how do I change this to have a course that actually would represent more the angle of sustainability. Perhaps there needs to be more support. I mean, so I publish a textbook, and I've created an amalgamation of exercises and slides and so on to be able to help, and I share as well. So when colleagues from other universities say, listen, I'm having a class and I'd like to talk about shareholders, shareholder relationship in tourism and hospitality, do you have exercises? And I do have case studies and so on. So I like to share because I think that's the way that we can move this along within colleagues, but not everyone is like that. So Leila, where are we here? So just let me know.
So we have an hour and a half more for 3 presentations, so you're fine. If you want to take a question or 2 more, you can. My latest comment was just about the fact that it is true that there are many hurdles, specifically in finance, in corporate law, and in general in the business field, that just don't seem to go away. Like you said, we have separate classes that are speaking about sustainability, but it's not really embedded in the main curriculum. So my project has just issued, basically it's going to issue a report, it's finalized right now, how to embed. So trying to force in microeconomics, trying to force in corporate law, and trying to force a little bit also in general finance, what needs to be taught as a mainstream theory now. But let's see how it goes on the institutional level, right?
Well, exactly, and yeah, that's it. I mean, the best way. So the universities that have set up from scratch those programs, I mean, this is great because they're really much more cutting edge. Mainstreaming is definitely needs to be. It's an uphill battle. It's an uphill battle from the design of the curriculum, for the design of the courses, and then from our colleagues as well. But it needs to be done.
Okay, thank you. I completely agree. I would like to continue this discussion though privately later on once we get out of the conference.
You bet. All right. Thanks very much. Thanks very much for all the questions. Yeah.
And thank you very much for a great presentation. So you can continue. You can share the session, and Maryna can go next. Okay.
All right.
Hello, everyone. Do you hear me? Hello.
We can hear you.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you very much for an inspiring presentation. An inspiring days and inviting me to this great conference. My name is Maryna Lakhno. Could you see my screen too, the presentation? Does it work?
Yes, it works perfectly.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so I'm from Central European University in Vietnam. from Yehuda Elkanah Research Center for Higher Education, and I'm currently a PhD researcher, and today I'm going to present my ongoing research and also my paper. It's about the UN SDGs as a global policy framework for higher education and the universities as local actors of global changes. If you see this little map I put on the very first slide, you can see these dots around. These are local dots, and these dots represent actually the global framework, Sustainable Development Goals, that is put by the UN and also accepted by many universities worldwide. So basically the universities act locally, but they do subscribe to global challenges and changes that are posed by the Sustainable Development Goals. The next slide, what I would like to say is that it hasn't started with the SDGs. The sustainability in higher education existed for longer term, for decades. And what you can see here is just the statement of UNESCO that the education and learning at all levels and in all social contexts can bring this critical change. And by critical change, we mean many things. As we talked already in the previous days, that the Sustainable Development Goals, they encompass many more goals, and they are one of the biggest UN initiatives ever. And sustainable development here, it's not only about one thing at university, which has been also mentioned in the previous presentation, but about many other aspects. What you can see here on the slide, it's not just the screenshots from different universities. It's basically the representation of how universities worldwide adapt to the sustainable development challenges, and how is it interesting for them to join these initiatives from all countries. You can find universities in Ghana, in the UK, in the Czech Republic, in Austria, in Spain that participate and encourage to work with the SDGs, and also university associations, etc. So what I would like to say with this, that sustainability is not just a mere narrative anymore. It's just not just being talked about, because more and more universities worldwide adopt the SDGs. They work with SDGs, and there is even this S ranking in higher education, which is something completely new that exists from 2019, and today we'll have a speaker from the Times Higher Education Impact Ranking. So what is it, the main message here? That basically that this tendency of working with the SDGs is completely different from something conventional, something that we had before. And it also challenges the idea how we perceive academic excellence per se. So we see the universities scoring really high in terms of sustainability that are previously perhaps were not in the first lines of the rankings and weren't that well known worldwide. What else? It's also combination of universities from worldwide, so basically from developing countries, basically joining this ideas, and here we see also other countries scoring really well in this term. My topic was about the policy frameworks, but what is actually policy framework? In higher education, if we think about it, there are many policy frameworks. We can start from the very local one, and the local policy framework can be something that a university has. For example, University of California IT policy. And many other, there are thousands and millions of policies that could be local. Then we have also national policies. It could be something, for example, from Ireland, from Austria. This is this National Strategy for Higher Education 2030 that is also connected to the Sustainable Development Goals. Then we have the regional frameworks like Europe 2020, European Higher Education Area, international like Bologna. And here I put a question, because the next one, what you see also here is the global framework. I presume that the SDGs are transforming the higher education as we know it nowadays, and it is actually global in the way because we don't have the regional representation, we don't have this, as let's say, sporadic participation, but we have the universities worldwide joining this initiative. But actually, the question is, what is actually a policy framework? Because there are many mentionings, but what could it be? This is one of the questions I posed also in my research. Could someone help me? What could be this number, 4,090,000? You can type the example in the chat. What could it be? This number. 4,090,000. 4,090,000. Number of universities? Not really. It's something about mentionings. It's something that, let's say, when a researcher starts to search for certain information, it's connected to the search framework. Yes, very good. Hit on Google. Yes, very good. So this is the Google Scholar results. Very good. Thank you. And this is basically the basic hit when we search for policy frameworks. And there are 4 million articles that mention it. Yes. To put it very simplistic, and if you see even the first article that was cited by 7,000 people, it has nothing to do about conceptualization of policy frameworks. Basically, these articles, they do mention the policy frameworks, but they don't go in depth. They don't say what actually is a policy framework. And further, not only in academia, but also international organizations like OECD, WHO, UN, you can find this policy framework mentioned 1,000 times. Also NGOs worldwide, they do mention policy framework, but there is no study. They themselves, they do not explain what is actually a policy framework. How do I see it based on the literature, combining the literature that already exists, but not on a policy framework, but in higher education scholarship? What I see here, there are two branches. How can we view this completely new policy framework in higher education? Even though it exists since 2015, there are still more universities joining, and it's a constant change, it's a constant process. So I see it from two sides, from ideational and actional. What do I mean by ideational? Ideational, these are the basic ideas, narratives that are present there. This is basically the core, the ideas that are present in the policy documents, in curriculum, in campus operations, and etc., etc. So these are also three trends in higher education. Let's say 3 new dominant narratives in higher education, which are also globalization, sustainability, and development. And they're also global goals or global or sustainable development goals. Also, you can see it also in the title. And also the actions. Basically, how do we act as a university when we adopt this SDGs? Do we actually reshape the policy frameworks that we had before? Do we integrate it somehow? Do we create something new? Do we just add some subjects in curriculum? So basically, these are the actions that universities have when they decide to work with the SDGs. In this presentation, I will concentrate more on ideational side. So basically, the ideas that are behind this this global framework. And I would like to start with some practical examples. And let's see, for example, the goal no poverty, right? How do we view this goal in terms of ideas in this framework? If we take the university as such, first question when we think about it, what is actually university? What are we talking about? Do we talk just about curriculum? Do we talk about students? Do we talk about professors? Well, what I would like to propose here is viewing it from the all 5 modalities of higher education, which enable us to see this framework not only from one side, but view it on all these different sides that university actually has. And for example, if we take University of Auckland, that scored 1 in terms of the sustainability, according to the Times Higher Education ranking. If we look at their report, at their sustainability report that is open online, we see that they work with the goal of no poverty at all the levels. We see the modality of education, for example, in terms of education, they do incorporate it into curriculum, they organize certain events, they educate their students, and they try to equip them with the knowledge and skills to ensure decent livelihoods, etc. The knowledge production could be articles, and also the University of Auckland, they shared a number of research on each SDGs, what research relates, and how do we find this SDGs there. So basically, it's all open information. And very interesting. So on a practical side, how do we incorporate it in the public debate? Well, the examples of what university can do is actually giving advice for the government in terms of poverty reduction. So basically coming outside of this local university bubble and moving to the governmental level, and also perhaps to the global level to promote poverty reduction goal. This could be also something like campaigns. For example, we see the For All Our Futures campaign that the university has. This is supporting the Maori students, refugees, and first and family students. So basically we see that sustainability here is not a narrative, it's something we put in action. And about service provision, well, the University of Auckland is quite an expensive city, and what they do is in terms of embodiment, they build affordable housing for students, one of the biggest campuses they are currently building. And the service provision, that the university courses for students are open sometimes for people who want to join university, so prospective students, and also that students are eligible. There's prospective students or foundation students who are not yet students but are planning to attend the university, eligible to use the library facilities, the campus facilities, and especially this foundation course is also open to students from disadvantaged backgrounds. So as you can see, there are 5 different parts where university can act and can show their commitment. So when we think about the second bubble, basically because we think about these 3 bubbles, 3 ideas that form this SDG framework, we see also developmental ideas. Well, one of the basic things that you can also find in the literature and also, let's say, see in many policy documents that education is connected to economic growth, as we also saw from University of Auckland when they connect higher education to reduction of poverty. Education and the basic needs as a right to be educated as basically the university's mission to connect it to this public goods also, right? Then there is another way to express it. It's about citizenship, it's about political participation. And of course, there is one of the streams that talks in the literature also that talks about the development as actually the driver of education. From the practical point of view, what we see in terms of this SDG global policy framework is that many universities, they create collaborations. For example, University of Manchester, it uses its research and helps the disadvantaged communities in India. We have many other practical examples when universities in Germany collaborate with universities in Africa, create research opportunities, collaboration opportunities, and so on. So basically, the SDGs, they help to create certain links between countries and also create this connections between education and prosperity. Then what I would like also to stress, because we have also the global goals, this is the other name of the SDGs. And here I'm not employing the international because the goals itself, they are globally oriented. Because reducing the poverty or fighting climate change, for example, it's very difficult just based on the local individuals or basically international collaboration. So what is interesting that the university having this global nature can act much more and can help in the advancement of SDGs because it can bridge the national, the local, and also the global by contributing to the sustainable development goals through various means, through various modalities that the university has. This is just the basic content analysis, this qualitative content analysis of the policy documents of universities. Here I took top 3 universities. So we have University of Auckland, University of Manchester, and McMaster University in Canada, and how they basically mention the sustainability in their policy documents and their SDG reports, which they also publish openly for public every year. And as you can see, all 3 of these ideas are mentioned quite frequently and elaborated upon. Here, of course, the titles are excluded and the titles of the projects are excluded. So here we just see the explicit references and let's say, discussion on this ideational bubbles of the framework. Just some food for thoughts. Why is it recognizing it as a global policy framework is so important for us? What do we get from it? Well, first of all, the nature of a university, of a higher education institution itself, it allows to bridge these gaps between local and global opportunities, and there are much more opportunities for development that are then coming out of these collaborations. Another thing that I also noticed, which is quite interesting, is that we have many, we can say that before SDGs, the university had also other policies that are similar to SDGs, like gender policies, or we have no poverty policies, or we have something about green campus, right? So the SDGs didn't bring something completely new and innovative because there were already pre-existing bases for that. But what the SDG does, what I see from the examples and what I read in the reports, is that they help to unite the strands in higher education under one umbrella and make sustainability, globalization, development, and other policies work together. They make them easier to see, to implement, and to monitor also, because what we can see also in these reports, then the university sees what they've done in a particular goal, and basically it in a way, it helps to overcome this fragmentation and make it united. Again, this is the first kind of the global policy framework in higher education, because we haven't seen any global policies frameworks that were to such degree, let's say, popular and talked about. And so far, I haven't come across any other global policy framework. And it does provide a lot of opportunities for research, scholarships, global collaborations, joint degrees, what we see, for example, between Canadian universities, European universities. We have also Asian universities collaborating. So basically, it opens many more doors for research and outreach. And because the goals are so broad, universities can act in many other ways and can bridge different ideas under one umbrella. And well, I would like to end my presentation with one of the remarks, because we know that universities are crucial for the future because they are the places where the future influencers, decision makers are educated. And you know that today those people are students, they study the subjects, and today they take it away and they make an impact through their professional and private lives. Thank you very much for listening, and looking forward to your comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Maryna. Leila, I don't know if you want me to chair a little bit this, or whether you're going to, but
yes, please be the chair, be the boss, with great pleasure.
Yeah, I wasn't too sure if I was the chair actually. I just wanted to present, but I'll be happy to take over that job a little bit. So Maryna, thanks very much for this. So if there are questions to Maryna, you can put those questions straight into the chat box. Otherwise, Maryna, do you maybe a question for me just to get started a little bit? When you look down towards the future, so are you positive about the changes that you see happening at universities from your research?
Yes, I'm positive because you see, lately I've been reading many of the reports and also attending conferences on this topic, and I see there are many changes, much motivation, also from the side of administration, from the side of students, professors. And I'm positive because already, of course, not everything can be done and can be achieved, and achieving SDGs just by universities, of course, is mission impossible. But what I see, it's already having this kind of networks, having these opportunities, and this huge interest that has been shown in the last years already brings me to some positive notes. And also what I see is that universities which were previously maybe not well heard can also share their voices and can also be heard about, because now the sustainability is not only about higher education. We can see that it's not only the universities that can change it. There are also businesses, governments, and also individuals. But what I see already, this opportunity provides us many positive aspects.
Do you see as well in the policies that universities have put together, also in terms of commitments about their own operations, rather than the programs that they operate and so on, about their own operations as a, yeah, perhaps a carbon intensive business? I mean, we're operators and owners of buildings, massive amount of buildings across the globe, and they need to be heated, cooled, and so on. And so, and the externalities, of course, of students traveling and us going to conferences, etc. Is there something in that's actually reflected as well in the policies in terms of their own operations rather than the programs?
Of course, of course. So basically, the campus operations are one of the central things, and what you can also see, many universities are proud nowadays that they are carbon neutral university, or they are aiming to be so. And let's say these green campus policies, they also pre-existed much before the SDGs. Yeah, so it's not a new thing to think about this climate change topics in the university context. But again, what I really like about it, actually, that the SDGs help to also to connect these policies with other things. So they can connect the greening universities with poverty reduction, with providing jobs for people in the sustainable energy business, let's say. And of course, I think that's actually, if you look at the literature, very interesting. This green campus topic is one of the most persistent one talked in the literature. This green environmental programs, etc.
Right. Yeah.
So I think that environmental programs are actually one of the first ones to pick this topic. You know, so basically this, for example, at my university, the environmental program, master's program, has really a lot of SDGs involved in teaching also, and also there are certain certain collaborations with the companies and guest speakers coming, and basically the environmentalist part of the higher education, I guess it's one of the first one to go for it, yeah. Which could be quite challenging in terms of economics, for example, what you said, or in terms of finance, yeah.
Of course.
But I think the campus is one of the first things as you as a student or even as a visitor you can see, right? And
that's right. It has a very tangible component to it. And so, yeah, you know, it's about walking the talking, basically. And I think campuses, I mean, universities, I've got the duty, in fact, right? It's not quite good enough to have programs, but not walking the talk. There's a great question. There's actually two great questions, which perhaps we'd like to pick up here. Jose is asking in the chat, what about urgency, the context of urgency that we're in? How can we incorporate the time dimension into the frameworks so that we can be more successful in pushing for transformative changes in a few years? And that's so that, I mean, universities being organizations that are actually fairly big at times and fairly slow to actually provide any transformation. It's a very slow monsters at times. So how can we do this time dimension, this concept of urgency in pushing transformative changes?
You're right. It's not easy in terms of administration, yes, to approve the changes and to implement, because it's what is actually challenging, you know, and what is puzzling for me. It's why so many universities actually decide to do it, though it requires a lot of organizational and financial and a lot of staff effort, also in terms, because we see also this SDG office or sustainability office being established. And what I think about it is that what can we do in order to incorporate it faster?
Yes.
Well, there is no such a simple answer to that, I think. It also really individual in terms of every higher education institution. So in some universities and in some contexts, some countries, universities are very autonomous and they're free to do more or less what they want, yeah. Whereas in some countries it's more restricted by the governments and by the governmental initiatives. So in some countries, let's say, also in Europe, we have more autonomous universities and more dependent universities, also on the government. So I think it's also about the governments in some way, and also about the them helping universities also to adopt these programs. Because what I heard also from certain universities, that they really depend on the governmental programs, how they develop, right? How they develop their curriculum. what is being accredited, what is being as seen as what is being funded, right? So this is also a huge question, right? Also, I think the students themselves, which is play a huge role. So the student initiatives do play, the student activism. So what we see about global climate change. So many universities have had to rethink their policies also after this movement, what we saw, and that still continue. After the students stood up and said, we don't want our university to invest in fossils anymore, we want to have green campus, etc. So it's a combination of factors. I think a lot depends on the context of the university, and also on the leadership of the university. Also, willing to work with this framework, willing to invest time, invest financial resources. But again, the SDGs, in the way they are to 2030 goals, 2015 to 2030, so they already have this time frame in them. So for universities, very often you see strategy 2030 or 2030, also national strategies for higher education, like in Ireland, 2030 strategy, which basically is based in a way a lot on the SDGs.
That's it. Yeah, and this idea of bottom up from the students, it is so powerful. I've seen it in many campuses I've been to, in driving actually change on the campus for sure. But this commitment from top is also very, very important. Two questions that have just come in. So Leila is asking about how you dealt with the hurdles of academic freedom under the changing institutional framework. So this, and I think this is a topic that often comes in terms of how do you move an agenda forward within an academic freedom that we all enjoy. So that's one thing. And then Dirk is also asking, SDGs are integrated and divisible. How do you tackle this challenge in higher education, segregated in disciplines? So there's really two questions here to answer.
For you. Thank you very much for the great questions. They are indeed very, very interesting. In terms of academic freedom, Leila, do you mean that academic freedom in general, or is it the freedom of professor or let's say administrator to decide whether or not to adopt this institutional change?
In general, what I mean by academic freedom is that the professor can actually decide what to implement or what not, despite the institutional policy, because we do have that freedom. You don't need to follow the orders, because otherwise there is no academic freedom. So in that sense.
What is, I think, interesting, I don't remember exactly which university, I think in Denmark, the subjects were ranked according to their SDG usefulness, which is quite interesting. I mean, and again, this is bottom up, would be, especially for elective courses. For example, at my university, the SDG elective course is really popular among the students, especially because we have many initiatives, many people fighting to stop the climate change, and because actually the SDGs are so universal. We have so many topics there. We have gender equality, climate change, we have protection of the ocean. So basically we have always people who are, let's say, active in these fields. So what I think it could be maybe one of the solutions when this university in Denmark actually did showing up their rank position of the SDG relevance, and especially in electives that can perhaps attract more students. And I think also for academics, one of the I haven't dealt with that, but one of the biggest perhaps pushes is the research collaboration. So universities that have let's say participate in the SDG networks, they provide, I looked it up about the frameworks and their influence on the university. If this framework network, where university participates, offers, let's say, some exchange of ideas of the SDGs, provide some conferences, etc. On this topic, perhaps the professors can get more interested in that. But of course, academic freedom cannot make us push someone to teach the subject or to implement. But perhaps if their colleagues implementing the subject, and if there's this tendency in university, maybe it can provide a positive change. But indeed, that's a very interesting question. And how do you tackle this challenge of integration in higher education, segregated in disciplines? Well, this is not easy again, coming up with the topic that was mentioned before in the previous presentation. How do we integrate it in finance or mathematics, for example? Yeah. How do we work with this? I think just from the experience, what I saw at universities, it's about the curriculum, some part of it, but the bigger part is also about outreach programs the university has. It's also about the campus solutions. It's also about even paying their staff equal salary and providing scholarships for students from disadvantaged backgrounds. This is how university can integrate it in the university as such, make it more inclusive, perhaps even if university doesn't put it as a topic in the mathematics course, but then that students also have the opportunity to get engaged in other activities that are present. And again, here I would say about these modalities of education. So what about the public debates? What about the campus provision? So basically integrating it on all levels. And yes, it also depends on the resources of university and on willingness to do it. Because the SDGs are non-compulsory, they're non-binding. Basically, we see here just voluntary participation. The SDG, or at least the tackle any future, I think that the following. Okay, thank you very much. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much. That was excellent and lots of food for thoughts. Leila, do you want to take over for the presentation of the next speaker?
Sure, with pleasure, not a problem. So we're going to be embedding now the SDGs in higher education in the COVID context, which is something that we haven't done yet. And I'm very, very excited to welcome our next presenters to speak a bit about SDGs in the framework also of the current pandemics. So please, you can take the floor, Professor Singh.
Is my screen visible at the moment?
It is visible. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Vinayak Jhamb, and I'm pursuing my PhD at University School of Law and Legal Studies, Guru Gobind Singh Indraprastha University, New Delhi, India, under the supervision of Professor Dr. Kanwal D.P. Singh. We curated a topic on the broad theme of sustainability of education, and it is titled as Bearding the Lion in His Den, Mapping Sustainability in Educational Sector During the COVID-19 Pandemic in India. Let's move on to the introduction part. COVID-19 has definitely created some multifarious issues permeating through the state boundaries, and it is degrading the quality of life of an individual. Education, which is believed to be one of the most intrinsic components of quality life of an individual, is drastically affected. So the present research essentially intends to decipher the contours of the fourth sustainable development goal, that is quality education. Now, the major themes of the present research work shall entail: firstly, highlighting the definition of sustainability; secondly, education being the focal point of sustainability; thirdly, exploring the nuances of quality of education; fifthly, country-wise analysis of quality education and literacy rates; use of information and communication technology in education; and lastly, differentiating the approaches of developed as well as developing countries pertaining to the online education. Let's move on to the statement of problem. The statement of problem for the present research is threefold in nature. Firstly, the contours of online education under the Sustainable Development Goals have not been utilized completely. Secondly, the governments across the globe have been turning a blind eye and a deaf ear towards the educational sector in terms of investment, infrastructure, etc. And lastly, but certainly not the least, a widespread gap between those who are able to access online education and those who are not, that is technologically savvy people and Lahadites, is increasing exponentially. Now, the hypothesis of the present research shall be threefold in nature. Firstly, sustainability in education has not found a due place in the international as well as national legal regimes. Secondly, developing countries do not possess the requisite infrastructure to adapt to the fourth SDG, that is quality of education. And lastly, the unprecedented nature of the COVID-19 pandemic has drastically affected the education system across the globe. With these set of hypotheses in mind, the following research questions have been drafted: to analyze the legal imperatives in international and domestic legal paraphernalia; second, to discuss the regulations pertaining to online education in India; thirdly, to study the present system of online education in India and the directives of the regulatory bodies like University Grants Commission, Bar Council of India, etc. Fourthly, to empirically analyze the perspective of students vis-a-vis online education system; and lastly, to develop a comprehensive model for India vis-a-vis online mode of education. scope of the study shall look into the design, effectiveness, and challenges of the online education strategies adopted by various countries. Secondly, the researchers shall try to contemplate to come up with a topic or to come up with a model on the use of ICT for India pertaining to quality education. And limitations of the present research shall be as follows. The empirical research has been restricted to senior secondary school students and college students. Secondly, the study has only evaluated the sanctity of SDGs 2015 vis-a-vis different jurisdictions. Thirdly, the study includes 100 respondents for data collection. Therefore, large-scale generalizations are not possible. However, we shall be delving into a number of respondents in the later course of our research. But presently, for data analysis, 100 respondents have been taken into consideration. And lastly, researchers shall be analyzing the limited jurisdictions in developing and developed countries. However, there has been no deliberation as to what sort of jurisdiction shall be taken into consideration. The entire scheme of the presentation shall be categorically divided into two major parts. Firstly, the doctrinal part, and secondly, the empirical part, which will involve data collection analysis pertaining to sustainability of education. Let's move on to the first part of the discussion, that is doctrinal part. It is very difficult to define sustainable development with utmost coherence and precision. But Stockholm Declaration of 1972 defines the term sustainable development, and I quote, development that meets the needs of the present generation without compromising the needs of the future generations to meet their own needs. This definition is still accepted in the international community. However, smaller amendments have been made to this definition starting from Stockholm Declaration of 1972 to Montreal Protocol at 1987, Earth Summit in the year 1992, then MDGs, Millennium Development Goals in the year 2000, and finally MDGs were replaced by SDGs in the year 2015. The 17 Sustainable Development Goals are broad guidelines or standard operating procedures for the countries to imbibe those rules in their legal systems. But one of the most important aspects of the SDGs is the last goal, that is the 17th goal, which itself talks about the means of implementation of these goals. And it is usually done through collaborations and partnership across nations. Some of the strategies which work in close coordination with the Sustainable Development Goals of 2015 are presented on the screen. Firstly, Istanbul Declaration and Program of Action. Secondly, the SIDS Accelerated Modalities of Action. And thirdly, Vienna Program of Action for Landlocked Developing Countries for the decade 2014 to 2024. The recent Sustainable Development Goals report of 2020 brings together the latest data pertaining to the SDGs before the onset of COVID-19, explicitly showed that progress remained limited and the countries were not on the right track. And goal 4 and 5 were the cause of concern for the entire globe. And goal 4 is the epicenter of our present research. There are multifarious contours of the term sustainable development, but one of the most important contours or genres is quality of education. Quality education is the policy instrument for all the countries, as education is an effective tool of social change. It reduces inequalities and is also crucial for fostering tolerance between people. However, quality education surfaced in the Millennium Development Goals of 2000 but was restrictive in nature and only talked about primary education per se. Later, it resurfaced in the Sustainable Development Goal number 4, and the phrase which was used was quality of education, and interpretation was left wide open to include primary, secondary, tertiary as well as vocational education under its domain. Till September 2015, the world literacy rates were extremely or disturbingly low, particularly in the South Asian countries. India was also on the same lines. But the question which crops up in front of us is, what are the parameters or criterion of quality of education? With reference to this, several rounds of global consultations and meetings with the UN member states, international regional organizations, academia, businesses, NGOs, and civil society, they sat together and drafted a list of 11 global indicators to monitor the Sustainable Development Goal number 4, which was formally adopted by the UN General Assembly in the year 2017. Now, quality of education needs to be promoted in and out, this is for sure. But one of the prominent aspects of quality of education is the effective use of information and communication technology. And this is generally assessed with reference to schools with access to electricity, the internet for pedagogical purposes, computer for pedagogical purposes, and requisite infrastructure to promote the quality of education in total. Now, COVID-19 has definitely increased the use of ICT in education, and this new normal has evolved eventually. Unprecedented nature of the pandemic forced down the schools and colleges to just shut down altogether, and online education became the most viable option. So chalk and talk has become the matter of the past. Due to this unprecedented nature of the COVID-19, schools and colleges have been forcibly shut down, as a result of which learning outcomes of the children have gone down immensely. Therefore, we need to curate a certain plan wherein dissemination of education or dissemination of knowledge can be made through online mode. And this is essentially the fundamental or the underlying premise of online education system. Even before the onset of COVID-19, India had been taking baby steps in this direction, and regulatory authority, which is the University Grants Commission, came up with the UGC online regulations 2018 and moved massive open online courses and learner support services to reach rural population. Even after COVID, UGC circular number F11-2020 states that examinations and classes should be conducted through online mode. Even the Bar Council of India, which is the regulatory body for law and legal studies, notified the same on 9th June 2020. However, it is to be noted at this juncture that even though the Indian authorities have been time and again talking about the promotion of online education and examination, children are still averse to this idea, and therefore appeals have been filed by these students only across our country to postpone the exams, as it is detrimental to the career competence as it is believed by those students. Now, one of the important genres of online education is offering remote learning to students through virtual classrooms so as to mitigate the impact of school closures. But there are n number of impediments or innumerable impediments with respect to this. One of the impediments is that successful remote learning depends on the computer skills of teachers and parents. In a developing country like India, wherein half of the population is on the other side of the digital divide, it is unimaginable to fully go with respect to online education, or fully go online with respect to education sector. Now I shall be talking about the differential approach, that is the difference between the developed and the developing nations in this approach. Developed nations such as US have been increasingly spending much on educational sector, exceeding $200 million a year. Training has been imparted to teachers and students in ICT. All classrooms have multimedia setup, and also online resources and learning material is readily available. Even in UK, post-1990s, use of ICT has been overemphasized. Some South Asian countries like Singapore have also particularly emphasized on the issue of investing more on the technological education per se. If we look at this graph clearly, we can comfortably infer that 23.88 of the world population, poor population, lives in India. A country which is fighting off hunger and poverty in the first place, can we actually expect it to contribute immensely in the reign of education, or in the region or arena of educational investment per se? No. As a corollary to this, the other graph, which has been taken from the Global Learning Assessment database, shows that South Asian countries, many of the 10-year-olds cannot even read properly. But again, going back to the graph, it can be clearly inferred that where a country itself is fighting off hunger and poverty, it is unimaginable to even think that that particular country shall be investing in the educational promotion of the individuals. Now, the struggles of India during the COVID-19. But with respect to the struggles, firstly, there have been certain norms with respect to online education which have been drafted by the UGC, that is the University Grants Commission, the regulatory body for universities in India. And they include as follows: UGC Online Education Rules 2018, MOOCs, Bar Council of India's notification dated 9th June, and various notifications and circulars of UGC. Though they have been trying their best to come up with the concept of online education in India, still they have not been able to come up with concrete norms for conducting online classes. Even private universities, on the other hand, are trying their best to come up with multifarious courses, but their ultimate objective is profit maximization, which actually desanctifies the entire purpose of online education. Now, the reaction of students can be gauged from the following points. Firstly, there is an uncertainty with respect to the onset of classes in August. Even though there are multiple universities which have gone online or which have gone for online mode of education, still the aversion of students with respect to the idea of giving their final exams and classes online is quite prominent, and they are filing petitions in the court regarding the same. Even the students, Indian students which have been which have gone to foreign universities for their studies are stuck there because of lack of flights, and they are suffering miserably. The reaction of the universities can be summarized in the four following points. Firstly, adjusting application deadlines and waiving test results or giving students conditional offers. B, delaying the start dates for the next semester. C, extending the deadline for admission confirmation. And lastly, deferring the admission to next year at students' request. This marks the culmination of the doctrinal part of the research. Now we shall be analyzing the empirical study for India, wherein the perception of students vis-a-vis online education system shall be monitored. The researchers conducted an empirical analysis involving senior secondary school students and college students. The universe of the present research has been currently kept at 100. However, as I said earlier, the researchers shall be delving into more and more responses in the future course of action. The four major areas for analysis, apart from personal information, are as follows. Firstly, impact of pandemic over education. Secondly, understanding the digital access. Thirdly, mental pressure and online classes during the pandemic. And fourthly, government action and efforts analysis during the pandemic. Personal information relates to age group. The education centers, they go for training and education. And Indian education providers are categorically classified into two major genres. Firstly, government. Second is private players. Government has been further subcategorized into central, state, and semi-government universities. Most of the students have been taken from state universities in the northern part of the country, and age group 18 to 25 have answered the maximum. The following pie chart clearly indicates that 54% of the respondents were from state, government, either universities or schools. Now, the first point, that is impact of pandemic on education. 76% of the respondents somehow managed to take the online classes, and rest did not take up the classes. Out of 76%, 36% found them useful, 31% were quite positive about it, 9% wouldn't judge at all, and 24% did not find them useful at all. So overall, the success rate was 67%. The coming pie charts are a clear exemplification of the data stated by the presenter. Now, I shall be talking about the understanding of the digital access. In a developing country like India, it is not possible to imagine a contour or a condition or a scenario wherein everyone has unlimited access to internet or internet connectivity. Even though almost all the Indian population might be having a limited access to internet, but they still face connectivity issues. However, with respect to our respondents of the questionnaire we submitted, that a whooping 64% have Wi-Fi connection. So the respondents of the present analysis did not face technical glitches pertaining to understanding the digital access. However, this data only pertains to or talks about the urban population per se. We are trying to reach out to the rural population or the rural areas around the national capital of territory of Delhi, so that we can study the urban-rural divide and check the penetration of internet connectivity in our vicinity. This pie chart clearly indicates that 64% have a whooping Wi-Fi connection, so they did not face any problems pertaining to the digital access. Third is the mental pressure during the pandemic. It is quite evident that in an unprecedented event like COVID-19, we are surrounded by stress, anxiety, and multiple factors. Our dears and near ones might be affected by this pandemic, and all these factors contribute immensely to our personal life as well as our professional life. So we wanted to analyze the relationship between taking up online classes and consequently the mental pressure faced by the children. 44% students felt that yes, no, they did not feel any mental pressure during the online classes. However, 37% respondents felt that they felt the mental pressure. Even if we analyze the pie chart clearly, even if the maybe 12% is interpreted in the positive sense and can't say 7% is interpreted in the negative sense, still majority was able to not feel the pressure to take up online classes. Lastly is the analysis of government efforts. Students were generally divided over the fact whether the government efforts are sufficient or not. The sufficiency was backed by 37% and sufficiency was not backed by 44%. So majority of the youth of our country believes that government efforts in this direction are negligible or incompetent or inadequate. Universities across the nation are either using Zoom, Cisco WebEx, Google Classrooms, and Hangouts to conduct classes online. However, there is a lack of integrated Google system into the university's mechanism. Now, this pie chart essentially details out the discussions which the speaker has been presenting. Reaction of the judiciary with respect to government efforts. UGC notified the state governments and the central government to conduct exams at least for the final year students. Students definitely felt aggrieved by this action and approached the Supreme Court of India. State governments also expressed their inability to do so. However, three-judge bench of the Supreme Court laid down that degrees cannot be conferred to final year students without conducting final year exams. So the exams need to be conducted either in offline or online mode. Even the recent happenings of conducting of NEET, that is the medical entrance across the country, and joint entrance examination, that is the engineering entrance across the country, they were conducted with precautions. So the reaction of the judiciary in this regard has been clear cut. They want the exams to happen. COVID, non-COVID does not matter. The only thing is that they said that education can be halted for all times to come. Now, I shall be talking about the way forward, which shall be further categorized into 5 major genres: infrastructure and access, vision and policy, inclusion, capacity building, content and devices. First is the infrastructure and access. The government needs to come up with the requisite infrastructure so that online education system, which is one of the contours of quality of education, can be promoted in toto. And in a developing country like India, this is essentially the need of the hour. Priority 2 talks about the vision and policy. The policy makers need to sit together to draft detailed guidelines as to the online system of education so that there is no ambiguity or unclarity with respect to the entire procedure. Third priority is inclusion. This shows that in a developing country like India, it is clearly visible that gender discrimination is the part of the process. Since gender discrimination, caste discrimination, all are prevalent, third priority is including everyone in this online educational setup. Fourth priority is the capacity building. Proper training mechanisms need to be given to teachers as students so that they are able to familiarize themselves with the entire process of online system of education. And lastly, content and devices. The government as well as the private entrepreneurs need to come up with the requisite logistics for conducting such online classes, and there should be a proper procedure with respect to that, and that procedure should be encouraged in totality. Now, the concluding part of the presentation, we should break off the conventional methods wherein chalk and talk policy was predominantly practiced, and online teaching pedagogy, even though it looks difficult, but should be promoted. Secondly, the government should take adequate action in order to fully comply with the Sustainable Development Goal 4.3. And lastly, even though India presently lacks infrastructure facilities, but still we need to do a lot of things in this direction to make the way a better place for us. And lastly, suggestions for a better framework. First, improving the definition of quality education. Secondly, creating a standard operating protocol of online education, requisite amendments in laws, particularly in cyber laws. Fourthly, incentivization to private universities. Fifthly, learning campaigns for teachers and students. And lastly, a comprehensive code for online education needs to come up as soon as possible. This marks the culmination of the presentation altogether. Thank you so much. I open the panel for any question and clarification on this issue. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. Very detailed and in-depth presentation. Thank you so much, Dr. Singh and Vinayak. That's very good. Just a quick question from my side. Do you think that we will see a split? I mean, you're sort of arguing for the chalk and talk to be disregarded and moved to the side. But is there a chance that we see a further split in society where you'll have a two-way education system, the very much digitalized, advanced system, but with the hurdles you've mentioned, we might go back to talk and talk to a part of the population, and then you have a great divide. Is that not a danger in the next few years?
Thank you for your question. The point to be noted at this juncture is we are seeking an amalgamation of both sort of methods, the conventional and the non-conventional, that is the new normal. Right? So we cannot just restrict ourselves to one particular form of method. And yes, even though a developing country like India or Bangladesh or Pakistan for that matter might be facing certain sort of technical glitches in this area, but there is a long way to go, and we have been come up with certain norms, as I quoted in the presentation as well. We have come up with UGC Online Education Rules of 2018. So we have those laws and rules in our armor so that we are able to equip ourselves for the present times to come and for the future to, to make the future brighter. So I'm not saying that we should be restricting only towards the online method or the offline method. There should be an amalgamation or combination of both the methods. And yes, India or other developing countries as well are working in this direction.
Okay, there was a question.
And I would like to add that human
touch
cannot be done away with. And I would like to add that human touch cannot be done away with. What we can get across sitting face to face is very different on what we do online. So we actually need an amalgamation, not doing away with the chalk and talk, but making the technology use such that you could reach the people who are caught away somewhere due to the pandemic or do not have the means, and make education actually accessible to everybody.
Right. Okay. Thank you. So it's more a hybrid type of system in a way.
Yes.
Okay. Very good. That was a comment from Leila as well, and that mentioned that the value of human interaction, of course, which is I think we can all agree something that's very important in presence, in one-to-one or in classroom.
Yes. Yeah. Personal interaction cannot be done away with completely, essentially. We need to come up with a plan wherein it needs to be backed up with the requisite use of information and communication technology. The criterion of differentiating the developed and the developing countries was this only, that developed countries use this amalgamated, or, they as you just said, that it's a hybrid method altogether. But many universities in India still go for the chalk and talk policy exclusively, and that is where the seed of change needs to be sown.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Any further questions, please put it in the chat. Leila, do you want to take over? It's 12 o'clock and we have still one speaker.
Of course, with pleasure. So we have another presentation waiting for us. Nandini Garg and her colleague are going to present their research on SDGs and education. Nandini, are you here?
Yes, I am here, and my
yes, please.
professor is also here.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Singh. Thank you so much.
Good day to everybody, and thank you very much, Professor Kanwal DP Singh, for a wonderful presentation. And so we are going to be speaking about the need to incorporate sustainable development goals in higher education curriculum, and in fact curriculum all over the world. So I will just be sharing my content. Give me one moment, please. Yes, Nandini, are you able to see my screen now?
Sir, not yet.
Now, the presentation is there.
We're not able to see it on the screen.
Okay, one moment. I had just put on this start shares application. Should I do share files? I think I'll do that. One moment.
Yes, now
perfect. We can see it.
We can see it.
Yeah, you can see it now. Fantastic. So this is what we're going to be speaking about, and so we are here. We are going to be presenting about various things, how in education institutions, like ma'am has also spoken about the whole concept of blended learning. So we are doing something on those lines, and how newer things need to be introduced into the higher education curriculum. The sustainable development goals for removal of poverty, for environment conservation, and how these kind of things, peace and justice, strengthening of international institutions. So these are some things we are going to be talking about. Climate change, resource degradation, and what is the role of education, and especially higher education, in changing people's outlook, because ultimately this is an issue of mindset. And so we are going to be speaking about that. So good quality education is essential. It should be basically a right of everybody, irrespective of what part of the world you may have been born in. Countries like India are spending a very little percentage of their GDP on education, especially higher education. And now we are talking about more and more things like privatization, self-funding, various other things. So Professor Kanwal DP Singh comes from an institution which is the government institution but self-funded, and we are from an institution which is central government but we are not self-funded. So we are entirely dependent on central government for running of the institution, because we charge nothing as fees. We charge a few dollars, a couple of dollars as fees. That is just a token amount. So we are giving free education, and out of that, so let's say, whatever we are charging, out of that also 50% we are giving to them in the form of printed material. So, so is this model sustainable? That is one thing we need to look at. Uh, in the Constitution of India, this right to education finds mention in 3 places. It's the only right which finds mention in 3 places: Part 3, Part 4, and Part 4A. Fundamental rights, directive principles of state policy, which are non-justiciable, and the fundamental duties. So this is the only thing, like I said. So we do realize the importance of education, but when we talk about education, we are only giving them a constitutional mandate of 6 to 14 years. So we are not talking about mandatory higher education to everybody. That is not a constitutionally guaranteed right. So academicians have been talking about this, how you should prevent dropout rates and so on and so forth, and what is the importance of quality education for everybody. Everybody should get quality education. In India, we are doing various things with regards to providing quality education. For example, girls' education is made free. We have a lot of gender disparities. Some states in India are giving girls free education even up to the PhD level, right? So those things are there. Uh, in the wake of COVID-19, has things changed? What has happened? So these are some themes that we are talking about. Gender parity in classrooms, very important for a country like India. Uh, Decent work. The more educated you are, the more is your earning potential, the more is your potential for economic growth as a country. Our Prime Minister emphasizes on innovation, so we are going to talk about that. Emphasis on innovation is again another of those SDGs. Avoidance of conspicuous consumption. You can teach kids, don't waste resources. Even if you may personally have access to electricity or printing technology, or don't unnecessarily get into the habit of reading stuff online. Do not take printouts. Peace, justice. So we have seen that League of Nations failed miserably. We cannot afford another such failure. We have to teach people this, that this is something which we should not be, and then we will be giving our takeaways on this. So this is some of the things that we are talking about. There is a Bonn Declaration of 2009 which is dealing with the educational aspect of sustainable development, and large parts of Africa, South Asia. You can leave out maybe Southeast Asia where things are slightly better, but South Asia, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, major problem. Asia Pacific, Middle East, Africa. This is a major problem, that quality education does not exist, which impacts people's ability to get good jobs. I'm not even getting into white collar, blue collar, gray collar, good jobs. Okay, so even if you skill people to do blue collar jobs better, that is upskilling. So our Prime Minister talks about upskilling, right? So those are various things. I already stressed upon high dropout rates and how that needs to be curbed. And the reasons for high dropout rates are, poor people do not have resources. Education changes mindset. It's a chicken and egg situation. Poor people think the more number of children they have, more hands to earn that they have. And then there are family responsibilities, especially for girl students, taking care of younger siblings, running the household. Safety issues are there because, things are very different here as compared to the West. So people don't want to send girl students to schools and colleges, especially colleges, because safety becomes an issue. So can online teaching, distance education, as ma'am was speaking about, Professor Singh was talking about, can those be used not as alternatives, but as ma'am was saying, blended learning, which is a buzzword now in India, mixture of both. So the Millennium Development Goals and the Education for All, these are two major agendas and major breakthroughs. So we wish to talk about, the role of course, internet penetration has to increase. But a lot has already been done. Today we have internet. We are taking classrooms on Google Classroom. We are taking classes, and we find people from remote villages of India attending classes. Like I told you, our students in Delhi University are extremely poor, and they are coming from extremely poor and remote areas, most of them. So people are coming from Ladakh, where we are having this problem with China. We are having people from Northeast. We are having people from remote villages in Uttar Pradesh, one of the most backward provinces. And Uttar Pradesh accounts for 1/6, 1/7 of the total world's population, by the way. So 1/7 of the world's total population. So that biggest province, and so our people are coming from those places, UP and Bihar, and there is reasonably good internet connectivity. Is it at par with what you have in the West? Obviously not, but yes. So with internet coming in, we can actually use it to make some major breakthroughs, especially in the area of these kind of interactions, which are possible only as a result of COVID-19. So this is actually an opportunity which can be used. That's what we feel. Of course, it is a challenge, but it is also an opportunity. So this has necessitated the need for global connectivity and more amount of accessibility to ensure that there is no such disruption. And see, this kind of a pandemic happens only once in 100 years. After the Spanish flu, we've had this, and we have learned newer things. So every pandemic, every crisis teaches us new things. So the next point we wanted to talk about was gender parity. This is again a sustainable development goal, and our skewed gender ratios which are there, this is a good opportunity, COVID-19, that for female students, particularly sitting at home, you can actually do online classes sitting at home. You don't have to step out, so your security issues, etc., are taken care of. We find people who are blue collar workers, drivers, peons, etc., they're educating their children through mobile phones, smartphones. Data usage in India is among the highest, and in terms of smartphones, and is the cheapest in the world. So that's something which is being used, and previously it was being used for watching movies. Now it is being used for this purpose, which is very good. So much so that now cell phone providers feel the need to increase the rate of, the prices of data. But for now, the government has been able to prevail upon them not to do so. So education for all, especially girls, is very essential, especially when we say in India that educating a girl is actually educating an entire family. So can be solved this problem when we are, doing effective dissemination, effective engagement with teachers. Gender stereotypes have to be broken, and things are changing. Even before COVID, things were changing. So, for example, we never had women joining the police forces in India at the higher levels. Now, 1/4 of them are women in every batch of the Indian police service. We never allowed Indian women to go into the army in combat roles. Supreme Court of India now allows them to go into the combat roles. Fighter pilots. Previously, women in the army were doing only short service commission, 8 years, 14 years. And other roles like education corps, judge, advocate general, medical corps, and so on and so forth. But now you are even doing fighter corps, armored corps, fighter corps, whatever. So that is a decision of the Supreme Court, and which has opened this up. In fact, one of the pilots who was flying one of our newly acquired Rafale jets, first 5 Rafale jets, one of them was a lady. So learning and leadership across genders is something which is becoming very, very important. And we in India, like in other countries, need to look at it from the perspective of both learner and the taught. So both teachers and students, the gender ratio has to be improved. Among teachers, I am relatively happy actually. In our law department in Delhi University, we have 60% women. So I'm actually happy on that count. And I'm also happy because I teach intellectual property law apart from constitution law. So I am actually happy that when I go to these IITs, which are our top technical institutes, even in a class like mechanical engineering, where till 5 years ago you never found women, now about 20% of the class in IIT Delhi happens to be women. So this is because the strength required in mechanical engineering, cutting and all of that is happening through electrical saws and all of that. Foundry work is now mechanized, so you don't have to use brute force. So you're having more women, which is very good. So these gender stereotypes are breaking, and we need to encourage this even more. Can technology help? Absolutely, it can. 100% it can, because it helps working from home. Many people will argue otherwise, but from my own empirical evidence so far, and by speaking to various of my friends who are teaching psychology, I find that working from home or studying from home helps to improve participation of women, because in India, so the kind of challenges that we have otherwise in large cities, distance is an issue, safety is an issue, in villages infrastructure is an issue. So the next issue that we are talking about is the SDG regarding decent work and economic growth. So if you are going to be studying better, you're going to be better educated, obviously you will get as a country more economic growth, more robust economic growth, and you will also get decent work opportunities. So banking and financial institutions are going to be strengthened, and world markets have reacted strongly. So Indian markets have been reacting a little differently. So we probably Indian markets still have confidence in the Indian economy despite the tailspin that it has been in. So decent work opportunities will arise only as a result of better education, and in turn will lead to robust economic growth. So COVID has caused major problems, major disruptions. We have seen our economy contract by more than 20% in one quarter. This has been hitherto absolutely unknown. We have been growing at 10% every year, more or less, 8%, 9%, 10%, 11%. So we have gone up to minus 20% and beyond. And it looks that in the foreseeable future it will not become better, but I think the fundamentals are still strong. And so to solve these challenges, the emphasis should be on a knowledge economy, because that, according to us, is the only way out to bring a badly shaken world economy out of the morass. And BFSI institutions, banking, financial service, insurance institutions have to always remain in good financial health. Otherwise, our economy is not going to recover. A very heartening statistic is that our consumption of petrol and diesel is now back to what it was pre-COVID. So when we compare September 2019 and September 2020, we find petrol sales are 102% of what it was last time, so 2% more, and diesel sales are 96%. So that is, and diesel in India is an industrial fuel, farm fuel used for running trucks, railways. So railways, of course, is a bulk consumer. They are not running too many trains. So yes, so shows that the economy is maybe coming back on track, and things are hopefully improving. So diesel is a very important parameter for us. The cooking gas which we use has undergone a 3 times increase. That is because people are staying at home and cooking more at home. As simple as that, right? So these are certain things which so the emphasis on a knowledge economy will always be important. And there is, even though the health issues of COVID are going to be there for the foreseeable future, but I think the financial issues in a country like India, fingers crossed, are probably going away. We're moving on to the next theme of ours, which is emphasis on innovation, which is another sustainable development goal, and ought to be included in the higher education curricula. In India, we do not, unfortunately, give enough emphasis on innovation, which is a key to the knowledge economy. And our Prime Minister spoke about Atmanirbhar Bharat, which means self-reliant, self-sufficient India. Many leaders have criticized this on the grounds that it is encouraging protectionism and violation of XYZ agreement, and maybe anti the spirit of TRIPS, not the letter of TRIPS, but spirit of TRIPS. But Prime Minister says these are tough times and we need to be self-reliant. So, and self-reliance actually comes with innovation. Why should we not innovate? If country A has made better use of technology to produce hybrid tomatoes, why should we not do it ourselves? Why should we look to Spain for tomato ketchup? Why should we not learn from them? So innovation, best practices sharing, and doing things on your own. That should be a mantra of modern day education, we believe. And progressive teaching techniques, pedagogical tools which encourage people to think outside the box. We in India, unfortunately, do not give thinking outside the box enough weightage as compared to Europe. I have had the privilege of moving to Europe, several European countries, Cambridge, US also, Queen Mary's College. So I find that there is a lot of difference in pedagogy, which we do not foster enough innovation. So which needs to change, and because that will be in line with what is there. Uh, with the outset of COVID, there has been a move, as Professor Singh also mentioned, that we are moving on to online platforms, Google Classroom, which we in Delhi University are using, Zoom, Cisco WebEx, Discord, Loom, various platforms, and the one that we are using, of course, Blackboard. So these have been used. I think that they will continue to be used even after the COVID is gone, because we have access to so many better things. Imagine we can get speakers in a conference at a drop of a hat. In a remote village in Sonipat district in Haryana, we organized an international conference. We had 180 participants from across the country and 8 from different countries of the world. 8 countries of the world. How is that even possible? And some participant is sitting in, some VIP is sitting in Chandigarh and some VIP is sitting in Delhi. Otherwise, you cannot get these people on a platform. Even people in Delhi, it is very difficult to get them, because Delhi has horrible traffic and it takes forever to get from point A to point B. Now it is so easy. You can do it sitting in your house. So COVID has shown us this, and we need to make use of this. So webinars, conferences, seminars, very important way of knowledge dissemination, professional learning, and we should be actually thankful to COVID that it has helped us to develop these kind of learning mechanisms. The next theme that we have, ladies and gentlemen, is avoidance of conspicuous consumption and environment protection, which is what I mentioned. We should avoid wastage as far as possible, because our resources are very finite. Fossil fuels are very finite. The environment is the only one that we have. We keep depleting and causing a hole in the ozone layer. We keep damaging the waters. Ma'am, I will finish in 5 to 6 minutes. Thank you, Professor Mellon. I will finish in 5 to 6 minutes. So that is something which we should be taking care of. And because unsustainable development, unsustainable production policies is something which is which are going to have severe ecological impacts, and we in India are actually becoming more and more careful. There is we are a signatory to the Paris Convention, Kigali Convention. We are one of the first 60 founder members of Kigali. US, by the way, has not yet joined. So there are now 100, but we are among the first 60 founders. And so this kind of a compromise vis-a-vis the environment goes against the principle of intergenerational equity. So we have seen what has happened in Cape Town. We have seen what happens in India. Rainfall, temperature changing, apple belt shifting, because it is no longer so cold, so you have to keep moving to higher altitudes, frequent floods, droughts all over the world, glacier melting, millennial drought in Australia, which is a very major topic, because I studied this. I was doing my PhD in food security. So Murray-Darling Basin in Australia is the nation's food bowl, and very serious. I mean, they missed out in 2 years. They had only 50% rain, and this happened for 10 years. So in 10 years, they missed out 5 years or 4 years of rain. Now, this is our last theme, so to say, and then we will move on to the conclusion. I already spoke about the disaster which happened to the world because of a weak League of Nations, which was established after the First World War. And it was a weak institution, unfortunately, and it could not prevent a Second World War. After this, the UN was established, and various UN bodies, International Criminal Court, ICJ, UNESCO, UNDP, UNEP, UNICEF, various conventions, CEDAW, CRC, CRPD, Convention on Rights of the Child, Rights of Persons with Disabilities, UDHR, Universal Development of Human Rights. All these are attempts and mechanisms to help prevent war. But you will be only able to explain this to people once they are educated. So you have to educate people. You have to strengthen in their mind that ultimately, see, we have to work. The world has to work as one. Otherwise, there is no future for us. There are n number of nations today who are armed to their teeth with nuclear weapons. And like our defense minister said yesterday in parliament, it is very easy to start a war. God knows how it will end and when it will end. So I think wars, etc., have to be, we have not even to think about it. These kind of problems happen everywhere, not just in India. We are seeing what is happening in Spain, Catalonia, etc. We are seeing that problem. Europe, India, we are having those problems all over. So secessionists, vociferous, all those neighbors praying problems. No universal definition of terrorism. I think the world needs to think on this immediately. Today, there is no universal declaration of terrorism. One man's terrorist is another's freedom fighter. Serious problem. So higher education should include all of this because the children of today are the future of tomorrow. And higher education curricula should teach people that you should strengthen rather than weaken international institutions, and so that because only through these international institutions can justice, equity, good governance be promoted, and the gaps between the haves and the have-nots and the learned and the poorly educated be reduced, and that's how you can have progress and equity. So that is our presentation. On behalf of Nandini and me, I would like to thank you very much for being a fantastic audience. If there are any questions or interventions, we'll be very happy to take those. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Sirohi, for a very, very detailed presentation. If there are any questions, yes, and there are a few questions. So Hari Kumar is saying, do you not see Vedic science as a hidden knowledge for sustainability answers rather than modern information communication technologies, so ICT inventions? So if you look at the Dr. Sirohi, if you look at the chat, you will see the questions. Perhaps you can address the question.
Yes, please. Thank you, sir. I will just have a look. One moment, please. Yes, I see the question. Thank you. Vedic sciences as a hidden tool. Thank you. I mean, see, I would certainly not dismiss Vedic sciences because a lot of it is based on pure science. In fact, we are the inventors of science. I mean, of the zero. I beg your pardon. We are the inventors of the zero, without which there is no mathematics. And Vedic maths is far, I mean, people who know Vedic maths, they are able to do arithmetic and calculation a lot better than others. Of course, yes. Modern ICT has to be, it is not a question of or, it is a question of and. You have to marry the two and get the best possible solution. There are places where, for example, the West has developed yoga to a new level. We gave the world yoga, but the best yoga research in the world today happens in Japan, South Korea, and Germany, and New Zealand, by the way. So these four countries are the leaders in yoga research. PhDs in yoga, the best of them are happening there. So this is how the world gives and takes. It's a spirit of collaboration and not competition. So it is not that no, we will not have information technology, we will have the Vedic maths. That is a wrong approach to follow, sir. Because with all due respect, there is the Amish people in America. They believe that modern technologies are bad, electricity is not to be used, computers are not to be used, cell phones are not to be used. So they have their own way of life. I will not argue with that. But the modern approach is to marry the best, get the best possible. And yes, take elements from ancient India, marry them with the modern day technology, and that's how you get the best for everyone. So,
thank you so much.
That is the answer to Mr. Hari Kumar's question.
Yeah, very, very good answer. And Leila is also mentioning interesting point on yoga development. I wasn't aware either about the research on yoga development. This is something new to me as well in terms of leading countries on yoga research.
One more point, sir. Yeah, one more point, sir.
Yeah.
We gave the world Sanskrit, but do you know where the best of Sanskrit research is taking place? Again, Japan and Germany. Okay. Similarly, Buddhism. Buddhism, you can argue where it came from. Somebody will say India, somebody will say, Tibet. But the best research on Buddhism again today is happening in Germany and other European countries. You will be surprised. Very, very small little country. The population of this country is less than the population of my university. My
Yeah,
university, my university has a population of 2 million.
yeah.
This country I'm talking about has a population of 1.2 million. Slovenia is the country, Ljubljana is the capital. And
Yeah.
this country does the best possible research on Buddhism now.
Wow.
So,
Just
yeah.
one quick question for me, and there's another thing about the gross national happiness. Maybe we'll talk about that this afternoon as well. Just a quick question for me. It's a bit more of a hands-on question actually, because in one of your slides you were talking about the access that the population in India has through mobile data. So a lot of people have access. Perhaps at times it's a sketchy access, but they have a lot of access. I was wondering about the potential for micro-learning. Instead of having full-on courses and long semesters, what is the potential of micro-learning, where we look at small, very small chunk of information, small units, short-term learning activities to drive education throughout a wide amount of population? I mean, is that something that's being discussed at all, this micro-learning?
I think this is a fantastic question. And yes, we in India are talking about this. And in fact, Professor Singh would be aware. The UGC now talks about different course credits. So full credit courses, small credit courses, and so on and so forth. So they expect universities to come up with courses of fewer credits. So a full credit course maybe could be an 8 credit course, and you have courses for as little as 2 credits. In fact, Professor Singh's university has for long, I have been a master's student there. They have long been doing this
Yes,
this
we've
kind of
already started. We have already started taking baby steps, but there's
that's
lot
right,
of
ma'am.
work yet to be done.
Ma'am,
It's
you've
like
been doing
it's
it
not.
for a very long time, ma'am. I was there in
Yes,
2008.
but we are still not able to make that mark and penetrate into the rural population. We are still not able
That's
to
right.
convince people that we can share credits, we can have micro learning.
Yeah.
And that is basically lack of inclusion in our country. See, we
That's right.
have people having mobile phones, we have people having internet connectivity, but using it for teaching and learning, that is a new task. That is the new
Right.
So,
normal stuff.
so if I were to just add on what ma'am was saying, but intra university we are doing all of this. So supposing a
Yes.
psychology student wants to take up 2 courses in law, we are allowing for that.
Right.
And if a history fellow wants to study 2 papers of English, we are allowing for that. So I mean,
But
which you guys in the
Parikshit,
West,
there is one
ma'am?
more thing. We have to see what are the results. How many students
Yes,
are
that's
actually
right.
coming and taking it? See, we are still in the old mindset.
That's
History,
right,
so we
ma'am.
have to study history only. Law, we
Correct.
have to study law only. We have to break those shackles and see that actually good number of students come forward to take it. That is
Ma'am,
where we lack as a country.
correct. So, ma'am, but I would just say that, ma'am, things are changing. They are, I mean, in the
Things are
last few
changing.
years.
Definitely, we are
Yes,
taking
yes.
baby steps. Yes.
That's right, as ma'am said. Correct. Absolutely. Absolutely. And so there is one question which I see, sir, on gross national happiness,
Yes, what's
especially
up?
on behavior. Yeah. So Bhutan is the country which has pioneered this. In fact, they don't measure GDP because, again, see, everybody wants to highlight what is good about them. I have been there on 3 occasions. I will tell you a few things about that country. By the way, they can teach the world a thing or two about COVID-19 management.
Yeah.
Immediately, the first case that they discovered, they locked up the country. I mean, my friends wanted to go there by motorcycle. They were stopped at the border. You can't go out, you can't go in. Because,
Mm.
and mind you, that country doesn't produce anything. Everything is imported either from China or from India. Everything from a car to a safety pin to, I mean, wheat flour, everything is imported. Right? Very, very few. I mean, the only things they produce is maybe cheese and wool. Everything is imported. Safety pin, matches, something to light fire. Everything is from India or China, right? So, but they locked up the borders. They said we will manage. Don't worry. They don't have the resources. Until I think 2011 or 12, there was not a single traffic signal in the entire country. And when I visited last in 2016, there was just one traffic signal in the capital, a traffic signal. They did not have any of that because they don't
Mm.
have that many cars. But they always believe that our people are very content, and you will find that they don't have much. They live in very rudimentary houses, but they're actually very happy. So this kind of holistic development, and thank you very much to Mr. Hari Kumar for bringing this up. This is, this is a conscious attempt to develop, and this is probably one of the few countries in the world where, on their own, monarchy has given way to democracy. Normally, they have to be nudged, but here, on their own, they have moved not from constitution, not even to constitutional monarchy. The monarch is just now a figurehead, very highly respected. The monarch goes and plays football with the rest of the subjects and also with foreigners like me, but very, very approachable, down to earth. Nothing like India where everybody has gun-toting security men around. Nothing like that. But the country, the culture, the ethos is very different. And thank you, Hariji, for bringing this up. That the concept of gross national happiness, because that's what they measure, and that's what they like to be evaluated upon, not on gross domestic product.
Thank you so much, Leila. I pass on to you. It's slightly past our time.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Willy. I appreciate it very much. Thank you for your chairmanship. It was excellent. Thank you all for your presentations. Now, please take an hour of break, get some lunch, get some coffee, because we're coming back with an extremely interesting panel in 1 hour. So in 1 hour, we reconvene here. Have a nice lunch break and see you soon.
Thank you, Professor Miller. Thank you. Thank you, Professor Singh. Thank you, Nandini. Thank you, sir.
Thanks.